So this video is going to talk about TSS, which stands for total suspended solids. You can see it on the screen there. It's often called sediments. So again, the sediments in a waterway, or turbidity, how cloudy the water is. All of those are basically referring to solid particles in the water. Most of the other pollutants we've talked about are dissolved, and so you couldn't filter them out. But with these, you could. A lot of people talk about filtering things. If I filter the water, what I'm going to do is I'm going to only remove the TSS. So these are the solid particles that get into the water. Often it's measured with this thing called a Secchi disc. It's lowered into a waterway. You can see how deep you can see it, and that can be a way you can measure your sediments. So your main sources for TSS, oops, let me go back, is soil erosion or topsoil erosion can wash away into that, and that would be a big source of it. Living organisms, so things like carp will actually have like tentacles at the bottom, and those tentacles will stir up the sediments. And when they stir up the sediments, they're looking for little organisms living in the sediments so they can eat them, but they can stir up the sediments, which can reduce the clarity of the water. Algae blooms, like we talked about with nitrate and phosphate, add to, again, the algae is now solid. You could filter out the solid chunks. You could grab the chunks of algae in your hand, but that could be a type of like TSS. Again, mainly we're going to talk about like topsoil is your big one. That's going to really be your big one we're going to focus on. So there's other ones listed here that impact the water clarity, but for the most part, we're just going to focus on like the TSS or the sediments, the topsoil that washes away into it. So what happens? Well, it can do a bunch of different things. It can reduce clarity of the water. So as the water is less clear, then what happens is, and you can see like this green water, the sunlight doesn't penetrate as much. Less sunlight penetrating, less photosynthesis, plants can't grow as deep in the water. If there's a lot of particles, it could get into fish gills that could interfere with their oxygen uptake. So that could be issues for them. Or if there's really poor visibility, the fish might not be able to find their food, so you may impact how predators are able to find food and survive. The sediments can settle onto like fish eggs and suffocate the fish eggs, so the fish aren't able to reproduce. So that could be an issue. And it increases the water temperature, which lowers the dissolved oxygen. In the more cloudy water, the sunlight scatters more, and as it scatters more, it actually warms up the water more. And as the water warms up more, remember back to DO, warmer water holds less DO, so there's less dissolved oxygen in it. So those are your environmental impacts of TSS. Human health impacts is there can be, if we drink water with a lot of particulates in it, there could be heavy metals or bacteria or pathogens that could attach to those particles that we could ingest. If you've ever watched survival shows, they'll often say like the first thing you do if they're getting water from somewhere is they will take and they will like filter it through a shirt or something like that. They're filtering out the TSS because, again, diseases or heavy metals or other stuff could attach to that. So the next thing we're actually going to look at is heavy metals. And so, and again, those would it be attached to a particle could be a problem. So that is TSS and sediments. I hope that was helpful.